Welcome to Delhi Belly, a series of conversations around preventative health for people of South Asian origin. Today, on my way in, I saw a news article that said the AQI, the Air Quality Index in Delhi, was 378,
I don't know what
which
that
is
means.
very hazardous. To
Okay.
give you some normal levels, the WHO set guidelines and thresholds to say that air quality is poor when it is above 5.
Wow.
In London, it is usually between 10 and 20. We know that in India, the average over the year is around 100 in Delhi. And that over the winter time, which is where we're sort of heading towards now, or deep in now, is 300 to 400. In the past, in 2023 and 2024, we've hit 600 in Delhi.
Wow.
So the air quality is by a factor of maybe 5-10 routinely worse in India than in Delhi than it is in London. And I guess an example scenario in this is a gentleman who has a cough and goes to see his doctor and is diagnosed with COPD. That's a chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder, which in the West, in the UK, is associated with smoking.
Right, it's a lung disease.
It's a lung disease. And the problem is it's associated with smoking. And in India, and for this gentleman in this story, it draws a lot of stigma. His family think, oh, he's smoking secretly, or he's sneaking in cigarettes, or he's got an unhealthy lifestyle or a secret life. But actually, since 2016, the most common cause of chronic obstructive lung disease in India is air pollution.
Wow. So
rather
his
than
city,
smoking.
the air in his city is destroying his lungs.
Yeah.
I remember years ago landing in Delhi with my parents, and for the first 2 days, the stuff coming out of my nose was black. The pollution was awful. And presumably that's because of all the open engines and all of the kind of diesel cars and things like that on the roads, plus the airport, plus the way the weather works around there.
In the rural areas, in farms, there's a sense of that there's a process of burning crops. I don't want to go too far into it because I'm well out of my area, but that is a big contributor to the poor air quality.
Okay.
And you said it can cause problems with people's lungs and it can cause the black in your nose, but the WHO again said health pollution can kill, can cause poor health and can cause death. And the most common way that it causes death is through
cardiovascular disease.
68% of the 4.2 million premature deaths due to pollution were ischemic heart disease.
Okay, 2/3.
So almost 3 times as many people who get lung disease and die of lung disease from pollution get heart disease as a result of pollution and die.
Because you breathe in the smoke, you breathe in those horrible chemicals, they get into your bloodstream, they irritate the bloodstream, and they form atherosclerosis like everything else does around the heart, and that thickens up and kills you.
Yeah, and the reason we should talk about it is if you are predisposed to having heart problems or heart artery disease, which we know our Indian audience and people of South Asian origin are, the pollution can compound that, can make that worse. So just because you have heart disease in UK, in London, versus heart disease in Delhi, you've got to take the difference in pollutants into mind when you're stratifying that.
That's really terrifying. So 6 times higher sometimes the levels of pollution in Delhi versus London, and 2/3 of the premature deaths that pollution causes are from heart disease. And that feels like, particularly if you live in a city like that, we live in London, right? You don't want to leave because it's so amazing to live there. It does feel like that decision is bad for your health in some cases.
I mean, absolutely. But the thing is, there's a level of what can you do about this,
exactly.
right? If you're living where you need to for your work, for your family, you can't move. Last year, you would have read this really interesting article in the New England Journal of Medicine, which we'll link to, talking about nanoplastics and microplastics. And just to summarize that study, it was in 600 people who had an artery in their neck cut out because it reduces the risk of stroke. They looked at that under a microscope and found that more than half the people had nanoplastics inside that. So we know that this disease inside arteries, which we attribute predominantly to cholesterol, you find some nanoplastics in there. And so the question that we don't know the answer to in humans, but there's been some evidence in animals that can build up in the arteries around the heart and cause problems. And the relationship between pollution, nanoplastics, PVCs, it's something which we need to do the right science to try and understand.
We've got to be really careful with that plastic study. It was fascinating to see. I just think we need to know a little bit more about how the process works, whether those plastics are just kind of hanging out there or whether they're causal. That's really hard science to do. But it sounds like the association with air pollution and heart disease is much more strongly made. You did ask a good question. What can you do about it if you're living in the middle of Delhi? You're exposed to this pollution all the time. You know it's increasing the risk of future health disease. your vignette, someone with lung disease, but heart disease is also possible. Are there any things that people can do to avoid that damage?
I mean, the big things here are policy and public health changes that government needs to do, which is beyond anything that we can do. But I guess on an individual level, some of the interesting data that I've been trying to look at is about the impact of masks.
Yes.
We know that during COVID, when mask use increased, and actually all the different circumstances of pollutants, traffic and transportation around Delhi changed, the amount of pollution in the air dramatically went down.
Right.
So people were able to see landscapes and views that they weren't able to. People reported being able to breathe easier. The number of hospitalizations for chronic disease went down. Now, super hard to analyze that because of COVID and everything else there. But it would be interesting to try and study this in some way, that if you were to lower the amount of pollutions you take in using masks, what would be the impact of that? Again, the data out there is super difficult to interpret because there are so many different types of masks, some of which don't work. And even more complicated is if you're starting using millions and millions, there were 129 billion masks used and disposed of in 1 month of the pandemic. That has a burden of plastic. So doing these studies, trying to make recommendations, really difficult to try and understand.
I'm very reluctant to draw conclusions from a study done under pandemic conditions, particularly because I don't want a pandemic back again. To reduce the amount of cardiovascular disease is not a good solution. And there are policy measures that we've seen it in London that you can take to make the air cleaner. I would say that a clear link or a clearer link to air pollution and heart disease. Actually, there was some data from London. Some of our colleagues have shown that in areas where people have got higher exposure to pollutants, particularly specific types of pollutants, particle sizes, there are differences on heart scans. So on the heart MRI, which is a type of advanced heart scan, those people who live in high pollution areas have got different shaped hearts.
Oh, wow.
Now, that's difficult to tease apart from their relative wealth, because of course, if you live by a motorway, you're likely to live in a cheaper house because you've got less money. So you're more likely to be in other ways disadvantaged from both socially and from a health perspective. It's hard to tease those things apart, but there are signals just in London from different areas and patches in London where you can see more heart disease based on pollution. And actually that's some of our research, right, that we're doing. We're looking into geographical distributions along with pollution in this city. It is difficult to know what to do, right? Like if your job, your family, your life is all in Delhi and the clouds above you are made of smoke and pollutants, and you know it's going to cause heart disease, you really do maybe just need to stay indoors on days where things are bad.
Let me offer some recommendations and you can tell me what you think of them. So first of all, I think you've got to know what the level of pollution is in your area. So being switched onto that and measuring that from a reliable source and understanding that is super important. So you know if you're going out today, what you're going to be exposed to. I think you should also try and address any pollutants inside the house. So that could be the environment where you cook, what's happening to the smoke there, what's your, using any gas equipment or how you're getting your energy, fireplaces, things like that. And again, it's hard to say whether air purifiers and things are a must, but certainly if you know what your pollution level is inside your house or you think that can be improved, then that is something you can look at. But taking those sort of things that you can control in your local environment where you work is a great first step if you can do those things.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a day where you know that the air pollution is high, and there are some apps and things that you can do to kind of check those out. I'd maybe just stay indoors if you're if the air quality index is 600, for example, on a day in winter in Delhi. But that's hard for people. Like, it's not, people can't just stay inside all the whole time. It's really scary, and it looks like something that needs to change at a systemic level if people are worried about their health. But as we know from pandemics and other situations, that comes at costs. Glad I'm not making the decisions on that one.
Yeah, I mean, if any new articles or publications come out in this space, we'll talk about those in the near future. But for now, I think get the right information, know what your levels are, and do the things you can do to control what you can.
Yeah, stay safe.
Yeah, bye-bye.